How's it going, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. Today is the day. Today is the day. It is the first official day of the Modern Warfare 2 season, which means free agents can be signed to CDL teams. It means trades can happen. It basically means that everything we have been waiting for throughout these past few weeks, the day after champs, now up until this point, it all goes down today. I'm not sure if you've noticed or not, but it's a little darker in here. That's because it's still pretty dark outside. Yeah, we are recording this first thing in the morning to try to get this video out, which I believe will be alongside many others when it comes down to today. I had myself a coffee, feeling good, feeling ready, feeling energized for what should be a great day of some good old off-season roster mania. Now, one thing that I want to hit very early on in the day is what almost feels like the puppet masters going on right now in this off-season discussions, and that is the Atlanta Faze, right? We did hear a few reports that ARCITYS could be and most likely is headed to the LA Gorillas. So if that is going to happen, it just more enforces what Atlanta is going to do. Now that we know for a fact that ARCITYS looks to be headed out the door, it feels all but confirmed at this point. What now happens with ATL? Because we've had these conversations on the channel, right? Attach and Cammy, a few of their earlier options, Dashy's now in Optic Texas, all of their picks sound like they are ready to go to different teams, and it's starting to get more slim and more slim. But the one thing that I didn't want to talk about off the rip, because there's a lot of variables, a lot of things that by no means would be definite, is now that Atlanta Faze has let ARCITYS go to a different team, right? They've most likely been picked up. LAG had to pay the buyout because ARCITYS would be a restricted free agent in this case if this did in fact happen. So if LAG has done that, Atlanta Faze now basically in this situation would have the funds to go out and heavily enforce their negotiation process. Based off of the recent news with ARCITYS maybe going over to LAG, we saw a very interesting tweet coming from CDL Intel, and it, I guess, more enforces that possible buyout. It also heavily enforces what is Atlanta Faze's mentality now and search for their fourth. And he basically says Atlanta Faze are going after whoever that they want, both free agents and players who are already under contract. If they do want a player that's already under contract, it all comes down to if that franchise wants to sell that particular player or not. That instantly would put tons of fear in my heart. If I am any CDL team out there, I think, cool, we have got our roster ready for next season. Guys, you ready to sign the contracts? Guys, if Atlanta Faze comes calling you, you have to consider it. Like, there's no doubt about it. Like, you'd almost have to be dumb to not consider signing with Atlanta Faze. Do you want to play alongside of Abizi, Simp, and Cillian? Three of the most, incredible young talents, historic talents that Call of Duty Esports has ever seen. Do you also want to play alongside, a franchise that's been the most dominant so far in the CDL era, who's been in back-to-back COD Champs Grand Finals? I feel like they don't have to do a whole lot of selling. I feel like the team, the franchise speaks for themselves. If Atlanta Faze comes knocking on your door, you are absolutely going to answer, if not invite them in and make them your best friends. So you get where I'm coming from. And we also enter into this, I guess, interesting territory that you have to be careful on how you speak about it. If Atlanta Faze is also willing to go for players who are technically under contract, that then leaves a very interesting convo between the franchise and the player. So if Atlanta Faze comes knocking on said team's door for a particular player, I don't know exactly how that works, right? Does the player say, hey, franchise, I want to go to Atlanta Faze. Like, I am very interested in that offer. Does that franchise then say to that player, no, you're gonna be on our team for next year? What are you talking about? Or is it a matter of that franchise saying, okay, you want to go? I guess we'll let you go, because if you don't want to be here, we don't want you to be here either. It could lead to a lot of heated team debates. I mean, we could see some players leave rosters that we fully expect to remain intact going into next season. There's a lot that could happen with this. There could be a lot of interesting conversations and team changes that could go down based off of this news. So who's going to be Atlanta Faze's fourth? That's what we are here to discuss, and that is what we're going to talk about right now. So given the fact that Atlanta Faze has been rumored to be talking previously to players like Shotzzy, even on top of Dashy as well from Optic Texas, that to me basically says, okay, if they're interested in that, that means that they're also interested in future SMGs. So we're not just going to talk about AR players that would fit in this role as the main, or even the flex if Cillian went to the main AR. we're also going to talk about this SMG position. You could be saying, well, what happens? Because then you'd have 3 SMGs. Depending on that player, if they have the ability to go to flex, there have been a lot of discussions about possibly Simp going to the flex, Selim going to the main AR, and then you have this incredibly fast lineup moving into MW2, which could be great. It may not be good. Who really knows? But it is a possibility for Atlanta. So if they're already talking to Shotzzy, that is the reason why, or if they previously talked to Shotzzy, that's the reason why we're not going to keep any SMGs out of it. And I think that we'll go ahead and start off with somebody who I think would be, at least from a community perspective, and I obviously would think so as well, could be one of the front runners, and that is Hydra, right? Hydra has been linked to possibly going to Optic Texas. Obviously, it sounds like New York subliners have been doing everything that they possibly can to bring in the French phenom to their roster. And if, you know, he were to come in, like I said, he could run the flex as well. I think he's done that prior in his career, has been a flex player. His numbers, though, in SMG and SMG gunfights this season are unbelievable. The numbers just get better when you talk about him being in this role, but he would have the potential to go to a flex the same way that Simp would. So maybe you bring in somebody who looks to be the future of the league. It sounds like the language barrier is still a thing, but is not nearly as bad as it's previously been. There are, like I said, a lot of things you're gonna have to teach the guy, but if you are looking for an incredible just fourth slayer, somebody to bring alongside an already star-studded talent lineup, Hydra could be the perfect fit for this team. The next player, Pred, right? Best SMG in Vanguard to close out the season in unreal talent. It feels like he has only gotten better as the season progressed, right? After they won Major 3, despite the team falling off a little bit, I wouldn't say a little bit, a lot in Major 4, he was still just as dominant. He came into champs and looked unbelievable. We all remember, right? The Tuscan P1 plays, his rotations from P5 to P1 were sensational. He looks like he could be the next best player in the game, the next guy to really make a major surge. And if we're talking about historically over the past few seasons, you know, it was Simp who was back in that Black Ops 4 season. He took over in his first year. Shotzzy took over in his first season back in MW. And this year, it felt like one of those seasons, you know, in Vanguard. Pred was able to do that. So if you're Atlanta Faze and we're talking about, you know, who they feel would be the next guy up, you know, previously it was Shotzzy. And then now we're currently in what feels like the Pred era. So maybe you bring in Pred to this lineup as a secondary SMG alongside of a Beezy. Simp would be the flex, Selim as the AR. And the one positive, I mean, multiple positives about Pred, but one thing as well is that he sounds like a very fast learner. The comms got better. He's really embraced working alongside of somebody like Accuracy. His decision making is well above a rookie level, and so he could come into this Atlanta Faze team and mix right off the rip. Another guy maybe could be somebody like Afro, you know, was previously on the London Royal Ravens. There was a lot of promise with him. He's been linked to be joining this Minnesota lineup as well, but the positive is that he is an unrestricted free agent. Massive potential with this guy. You know, is a grinder, somebody who would match the same mentality of somebody or some of the players on Atlanta Faze. If they really liked what they saw from him, maybe in matches, in scrimmages, he also could be a front runner, especially if we're talking about, you know, Pred and Hydra, who maybe wouldn't be available or couldn't be attainable. He could be your guy. Now, the next and the last SMG that I'm going to talk about more in depth is, I think, one that's really going to surprise you, and that is Kenny. Now, we know that Kenny had a rough start to the season. People are probably saying, well, you know, he looked good on the SMG to close out the year, but really, could he be a piece for Atlanta? The positive about having Kenny, there's a lot of things here, right? He ended out the year very strong. I think he will go into MW with a ton of confidence. He finally has that monkey off of his back. He won a world championship. If you are looking in Atlanta Faze for a veteran voice, somebody who's going to come in and hopefully kind of fill the void that ARCITYS has left, you can bring in Kenny, right? Somebody who is, like I said, off of a world championship, off of beating Atlanta Faze, and I think 3 or 4 of the last few series that they had. Like I said, he's a great in-game voice, a general on the map, but he also has the gun skill. And being surrounded by the Atlanta Faze, he could be one of my favorite choices. And as I said, he can come in as an SMG. He could come in as the flex, his more natural role, and you put Selim as the main AR. There is a lot of interest in my eyes, if I was Atlanta Faze, to bring in Kenny, not just because of his recent results, but because of who he is, the talent that he has. And a lot of people don't know this, but how great that he is in game. He will keep all of Atlanta Faze accountable. I think he is the definition of having a general on the map. I tell you what, man, Kenny to Atlanta Faze just sounds very, very promising. You could also talk about his SMG partner and Envoy. That could absolutely be a possibility. Obviously, we could talk about Shotzzy. I mean, if everybody is on the table, it would definitely be one of the more difficult ones to attain. But by definition, he is an unrestricted free agent. So Optic Texas, if they can have pen meet paper, they're going to be in a much better spot. But if Atlanta Faze makes a midnight type of call to Shotzzy, gives it their best and says, hey, man, we want you to be on our team. We want you to be on this roster. Think about the things that we could accomplish. I know what just happened with Optic Texas. I know that this would cause major rifts. You'd be looked upon as the villain. But if you want to come to our team, there is no doubt that we would be the favorite going into next year. So that absolutely is still a possibility. And depending on the way that you look at it, it could be a 0% chance. There even could just be like a 1% chance, which I think is probably where it would stand. But you just never know. And then now when we talk about the ARs, talking about flexes, mains, somebody, you know, who we talked about a lot this year extensively was Sib. You know, he was an incredible rookie alongside a Pred, you know, did have some inconsistencies throughout the season, but so many moments throughout this year. Just incredible plays versus this Atlanta Faze team. He was the substitute for Atlanta before he would join the Seattle Surge this past year. So we already know that the Atlanta franchise was willing to invest in somebody like Sib, maybe seeing him develop a part of Seattle Surge under the leadership of somebody like ARCITYS. Maybe they saw enough. He's somebody that can work very well with the SMGs, and there is no doubt about it that Sib could be a top 3, if not one of the best ARs in the entire game moving into next year after his rookie season. And already in his rookie season, he was on the All-Star second team, somebody who is very, very hungry, somebody who's got a lot of confidence. And like I said, without question, one of the brightest stars moving into next year. And on topic with that, speaking of young SMG, or rather young ARs, very talented up and coming talents, somebody that you got to talk about is Scrappy, right? Scrappy is linked to be going to the Toronto Ultra. Toronto Ultra are going to hold on to him with every single fiber of their being, considering that Cammy is no longer on this team. You know, listed as a restricted free agent, possibly linked to going to the Minnesota Rocker. It sounds like if you are Atlanta and you really like the things that you saw from Scrappy, you'd be betting on, you know, somewhat of a risk, but there is no question that everybody wants to see this guy in the CDL. It feels like every single player says, hey, we cannot wait to see what he can do. A lot of the veterans in the scene, the Parasites and the Censors who have been in Challengers or still in Challengers, are talking about how, hey, this guy is not a risk. Like, if there is a risk attached to him, it's one of the lowest ones that we've seen in Challengers history, in amateur history. Guy has a ton of promise. He's a grinder, motivated, hungry, a trash talker, which everybody loves to see. He could fit in very well with this Atlanta Faze team. And I've heard a lot of stories about him, despite being a substitute, you know, for Toronto. He was willing to move to Toronto. You know, whenever the guys maybe were sick, or if somebody was taking a bathroom break, he would just hop on the controller and say, hey, let's run it. Let's play this. So if Atlanta Faze maybe has heard those stories, if they've been able to watch Challengers, which I'm sure that they have, Scrappy could be your guy. To me, that would be one of the bigger hurdles of the AR pool. Would simply just be because I think if you're Toronto, you want to hold on to this guy. He's basically your first round pick of the draft. So do you let that go? Not without a hefty price to pay, if even that number exists. Next guy, and somebody that we've talked at length about, is Attached, right? He's linked to be headed to the Minnesota Rocker as well. But it is common for rumors to be a few days behind. So maybe Minnesota Rocker, and in that article we talked about it, that's who they're aiming to get. That is what they're trying to acquire. If Atlanta Faze comes calling, now that things have been more settled, they know for a fact ARCITYS is out the door. We do not want him. Maybe now they give their best pitch possible to somebody who would be an excellent veteran voice, a great leader, put up some amazing numbers in Vanguard. It would be his first official season running the AR full time. So that is something to think about. I mean, could be the best fit. Literally could be the best fit. If you're talking about a role standpoint, if you're talking about what Atlanta Faze would want more than anything, they may not want an unbelievably talented Slayer who's going to be, you know, at a 1.3 KD. You've already got that, right? You've got Celium, you've got Simp, you've got Abizi. Maybe you want that glue piece, somebody who's going to be consistent, somebody who's going to be great in the comms and help lead the team. Attached could do that. And on top of it, if you look at who had the best KD versus Atlanta Faze this season, it is Attached with a 1.28 overall. Attached led every single player in the league when he matched up against Atlanta Faze, he was the best player statistically. So that could be something as well, that if you're Atlanta, they have, you know, a great analyst and somebody like Easy Mac, maybe they're taking a look at something like that, saying, actually, who performed best against us this year? It was, in fact, Attach. Now I want to move through this list, you know, a little bit quicker, but, you know, Cammy also could be a huge option for Atlanta, another guy who's linked to the Minnesota Rocker. But, you know, if you are Atlanta Faze, if you're Cammy, they come calling. I think that's something that you consider. There, you know, there's a lot of rumors that he could be linked to Optic Texas. If Dashy and Illy were not going to be in this position, a lot of franchises are betting on him basically returning back to form in Cold War with this new title coming up. Atlanta could do that. They'd also be able to get somebody who has been a part of that legendary teamwork roster in Toronto Ultra. You can say the same thing for somebody like Insight, right? Had a sneaky but solid season for Toronto this year. You know, could fit in very nicely as the main AR. Somebody who will be very clutch for you in S&D. I think is a great in-game communicator on top of it. Somebody who could also, like I said, similar to Cammy, implement that Toronto game plan that was the kryptonite for Atlanta at times in Cold War. Their only problem was trying to deal with Toronto, and a lot of times Insight was the guy, Cammy was the guy causing them all of those issues. Somebody else who I think is probably not going to be talked about as much when you think about, oh, you know, this Slayer or what this name is on paper, Slasher from the Gorillas. I mean, let's say that there is almost a trade that could go down where ARCITYS heads to LAG and you get Slasher in return. Now, it may not be the easiest sell. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who'd say, I don't like how that works. You know, Slasher, I'm just not sure mentality-wise would match up with this team. People forget how good Slasher's end of Vanguard was for this roster. I forget what stage it was. It might have been Major 4 or Major 3, where he had like the highest KD out of anybody in the league. He really leveled up his game in Search Destroy. I think midway through the season was playing a lot of S&D tournaments. It feels like his last few years have been frustrating, right? With the original OGLA team, when it came down to Thieves in and out of the lineup, LAG having success and then really just plummeting through the standings ever since. Throughout the content pieces, it just sounds like the little mistakes that his teams have been dealing with, they've never been able to accomplish. And so having Slasher, who could be at the top of his game going into the next title, now on a roster like Atlanta Faze, it could be a match made in heaven. I mean, if there is one guy on this list who is going to go at these players for not making the right decisions, it is Slasher, right? He is more than willing to tell Abizi, to tell Simp, to tell Celium, you're not doing the right thing. And so I think that you get somebody who's passionate. That could be exactly what you want if you're Atlanta. Now, another name that I think would be very difficult to attain, definitely more difficult than somebody like Slasher, would once again be the LA Thieves, and it would be onto Octane. Another Thieves member, but is off of the World Championship, just went back to back. He looked like Sam LaRue of old to close out Vanguard. I mean, he has a close relationship with a lot of guys on ATL. You see him going back and forth with Abizi a lot on social media. And I'm not sure if the players have ever said it or not, but I think that Octane has always wanted to play with the Tiny Tears. I think the Tiny Tears always wanted to play with Octane. You know, there was a lot of rumors in the early stages of the CDL talking about how those three guys could possibly form a roster together. And people do not realize, not just has Octane, you know, returned to his you know, level of form that we know him to be famous for, but he also has unbelievable comms. Some of the best communication in the league comes from him, and he could fit in very nicely with the Atlanta Faze. I mean, imagine Abizi, Simp, Celium, and Octane having these guys on the same team together would be incredible. I think it'd be a great fit. I think chemistry-wise, it would make sense. The problem being, though, is that he's on LA Thieves, and the problem also being that does he want to leave after he literally just won back-to-back titles, one of which being a world championship? The same thing for Kenny, the same thing for Octane. Would be very, very difficult to try and make happen. Another few players could be somebody like Priesta, has the chemistry with this Atlanta Faze lineup, you know, didn't have the greatest last year under the rocker. However, I personally believe that just hasn't been the right team for him. I think there's still promise there. You could maybe toss out a few veteran names. I don't know, maybe a Clay or a Krim. I don't know if that's exactly what Atlanta Faze would want, but the options are still there. Both of them are unrestricted free agents, considered some of the greatest players of all time. That talent is available, or at least that level is available, similar to Slasher. Now, the one last player that I will talk about before we do close out the fourth option for Atlanta Faze, who could be their last player, DASHY. Same reason we talked about with Shotzi, right? Do you throw out one last text, one last call, voicemail to Bruce. Now, it does sound like the relationship has been mended for Optic Texas, but it sounds like he would be their first AR option. That was really the only AR that has been, I don't want to say confirmed, but there was a lot of discussions about ARCITYS for DASHY, that kind of trade. And I'm not saying that there was 100% confirmation that Atlanta Faze was talking to DASHY, because I don't know, but on paper, this team would be horrifying to face off against. I mean, there was no question about it. Listen, Dashy, I realized, right, this would make you the instant villain. You'd be going against Optic Texas, a team that you've been playing for. I mean, you've been under the Optic banner throughout these last four or 5 years, whatever it's been. I know this would take a major turn, but if you want to come play for us, we are more than willing to open up our arms and let's go ahead and win some championships. This is the definition of a super team, right? A BZ, Simp, Celium, and Dashy. No doubt in my mind that this would be the most talented slaying team on paper ever composed, right? To face off against these 4 players would be absolutely terrifying. You would have number 1 and number 2 in the MVP of last year. And I think it's fair to say 2 of what could be the greatest AR players in COD history from a talent perspective already, if not already in that conversation, and a BZ and Simp who seem to be rising, more and more, even, losing in COD Champs Grand Finals. They're already considered, at least in my eyes, the greatest duo of all time. And then to have these 2 guys compared with these 2 ARs, this could be, I mean, just a career ending in terms of where these guys sit together to close out their careers. This could be where you want to go. I know there's been a lot of mentality talk about Dashy. Maybe that was the reason why he was going to be off of Optic Texas. But again, if you're Atlanta Faze, you have the ability to get his level of talent. I think you send one more final text. Let me know, guys. Who do you think would be the best fit for this Atlanta Faze team? It sounds like they are willing to go out there, search, and see who is available. Do you think they go with somebody who is, a veteran voice? Do you think they just go out with an all-out slayer, somebody with experience, or somebody who just has next level talent? I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. But that is going to do it for this one. Like I said, lots of content to come out either today or at least in the next few days. Make sure if you have not done so already to like and subscribe, and I'll see you back on the channel here very soon.